Live from Clendathu, this is Derailed Trains of Thought. I do not like the looks of this place today, Tim.
Yeah, this looks very dangerous.
Yeah, okay, big bugs just freak me out anyways, okay? So...
Yeah, I'm saying stay as far away from that band of soldiers over there as possible.
Yeah, they scare me more than the bugs do.
Yeah, let's just go hide out in one of these caves here, and hopefully we'll be okay.
Yeah, and
I think that's the only way to go about this.
So the podcast has to stop taking us to these dangerous places.
I agree.
I mean, when you go to like Queen Frostine's castle or something like that from Candyland, it's safe. It's food related.
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, there we go. Go to 100-acre woods. Have we been there yet?
It feels like we should have.
Yeah, I've been so many places. I just get turned around sometimes.
The podcast has a terrible mind of its own, and I think it wants to try to kill us or something.
So, anyways, we're back here for episode 47.
47.
Well, and hopefully we'll survive it, guys.
Yeah.
So, any minor updates you have?
Nothing that I'm ready to talk about on here yet, I don't think. New World's Rising is hopefully just around the corner. Most of the revisions are done, but otherwise, yeah, I think.
Yeah, it's very close.
It's very, very, very close.
And it's good stuff, so it's worth the wait.
Yep.
And we have actually a print version of our first 3 Brian Clean novels out now.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I heard you got those to Gen Con just in the nick of time.
Just in the nick of time. And you can order off Amazon, too.
Awesome.
Yeah, so those are our minor updates for the week, but I guess we might as well. So we're putting our lives in our hands, staying here. So let's get started here.
Yeah.
So story school. This topic was actually suggested by our badger friend, Greg.
Badger friend?
I don't know. He likes badgers.
Okay.
But Greg Meyer, who is a longtime listener.
And soon to be a Children of the Wells novelist.
Yeah, so if you listen to the podcast, we'll probably ask you to write a novel. But
not necessarily. Don't listen to Nick there.
But actually, he had suggested to you, Tim, about gratuitous content in stories.
Yes. And I remember what inspired the suggestion, I believe, is he had seen an article post somewhere, I forget if it was Wired or like IO9 or whatever that site is, Basically, someone had written some sort of like something basically written as if it was by a character in the Redwall series, the book series, basically a cross with like Game of Thrones
stuff.
Style, yeah. So it was sort of Redwall as if it was written with blood and foul language and sexual references and things like that.
And more than references, for what I understand, but
yeah,
I mean, Game of Thrones.
Well, right, exactly. And Greg, this really kind of bugged Greg because he's a big fan of Redwall stuff, which is a very innocent, childlike thing, and I totally understand that. To see that sort of thing dragged into the mud is not really something that I get any enjoyment out of. Some people seem to kind of get a thrill out of that kind of making something kiddish like that very edgy and dark and ugly. I'm not sure why that's appealing, but some people find that funny.
Yeah, I guess so. So I guess then what we're going to tackle largely is what is the place, or is there a place for this sort of stylistic, over the top use of violence or sex? Usually are the two things we talk about. We've talked about language in other podcasts for certain.
Yeah, we did a whole podcast on language, and I guess the first key is to sort of distinguish what is explicit content from what is gratuitous content.
Yes,
because the language episode, we did sort of recognize that there might be situations where foul language might be, even as a Christian writer, creator, you might have an excuse or reason to use it. But what about other things that are considered like explicit, like violence, gore, sexual content? I guess we could look at these as a piece by piece sort of thing. Are there cases where you feel like an extreme or an explicit sort of violence is justifiable?
Yeah. I guess explicit, especially, I guess it works for violence and sexual content. I think there's this desire from the people putting explicit stuff into that you need that rawness, that you want to hit the readers, or I guess a lot of times we're talking about
TV,
movies, visual, emotional gut reaction.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what they're going for, and I think sometimes they're going for it in a well-meaning way. They're not like, and I think this is where gratuitous comes in. What is, like we always ask, what's the purpose of doing it? For instance, Prometheus. Did you see Prometheus?
No.
Okay.
You have talked about it in here once before.
But anyways, like the first, I was telling, I think one of my friends the other day about the first third of the movie was like good old school sci-fi, and I thought, oh, this is neat. And I knew it was gonna be aliens, gonna be suspenseful and everything, and kind of, there's some gross out factors. I mean, that's kind of an alien thing. But there was some of it that was just, I got like turned away. I can't watch, because I'm not real good with the kind of gore, especially horror gore sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I remember watching in high school Braveheart for the first time.
Sure.
And that's a little,
yeah,
especially at the time, was just too much. District 9, kind of the same thing. Just, I personally don't need all that, but I guess I'm dancing around the question: what's explicit, what's gratuitous?
I think the common answer to like explicit content that might be justifiable is cases like Schindler's List or Saving Private Ryan, where you are depicting real life events, and and if you want to give the audience a feel for what it was like, or especially Schindler's List, these things actually happened.
So I guess here's a question though, and this is, I think, where people come down all across the line. Obviously, you want to reflect reality if you're doing a movie like that, like Schindler's List. But especially in the visual medium, how much of it do you need to show explicitly? Like Munich, pretty interesting movie. Some of it was very explicit scenes intercut, to kind of create the emotional distress of the main character. He's having sex and he's having memories of killings and stuff, and it's kind of to combine those two things. But it's just, how much of it do you actually have to see, and how much can you imply?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess people always say with horror and other things, implication works stronger emotionally. Then why does that not seem to always be the case in how people argue about these things?
I remember when I was at Regent Film School, one film festival that they hosted there one time. I remember I went to see this movie that was about abortion. And mainly it was about a teenage girl who'd gone through it. She it goes, and kind of their depiction of the being in the whole abortion clinic is very kind of uneasy, unsettling kind of atmosphere. But she gets through it, and then she goes to they have her go to her hotel to kind of recover from it. And this is based on a true life story where the woman, the abortion doesn't, I'm not quite sure how to say this, but basically what's inside her, the baby starts coming out. And basically she winds up having the baby like coming out through her into the toilet. And it is very graphic. I mean, it is, stomach churning. But abortion is such a scary, ugly thing that I felt like you need to see that. You can talk about abortion as much as you want and like just kind of gloss over it, not really let it seep into your, you just kind of look at it like on a very intellectual level. But unless you actually see the body parts floating like that, that's a whole different thing. Now, the interesting thing about this is like before the movie even started, I noticed because this is a low budget movie sort of thing, and they had it on a DVD, and I noticed that they had the DVD menu screen came up, and there were two cuts of the movie. One was the original, then there was, I don't remember what they called it, like the uncut or unrated or more graphic version or something like that. And I asked the filmmaker afterwards, it's like, what was in the other version that it was like, how do you get more graphic than that? And what he said was that originally, or in another version of the film, or the first cut, whatever, they had gone into a little bit more grisly detail about the actual abortion process. again, based off real facts, based off an actual woman that shared their story with them. But they felt later the need, like it was too much shock value too soon, that it took away a little bit from the goriness, if you will, of the later part, that they didn't, it wasn't worth having it at the beginning of the film.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's, I think that was a case of a movie that had the explicit content, but then it also held itself back on when to show it.
When to show it.
Yeah. So that's my example of one that kind of did it both ways.
Yeah, and I don't have a good answer on this explicit or when it moves. I mean, obviously, I think most people say gratuitous is when it becomes too much.
Right. But by definition.
Yeah, exactly. By definition. But then, where does that?
Where is that?
Where is that? I don't. Yeah. I mean, I can say where I think it is, but I mean, is there? I wonder if there's some sort of thumbnail sketch we can give to people. I mean, obviously, we've already talked about know what the story you're telling, and if it doesn't move that story forward, why is it there? I think people talk about gratuitous action scenes, blockbusters. Like, look, it didn't need to be a half an hour of battle. It only needed to be 15 minutes or whatever.
Sure.
And, we'll talk about that, but we don't, and I'm not sure critics complain about gratuitous sex as much as gratuitous action scenes in blockbusters. But,
well, it is interesting. There is this current debate that's going on, not so much with movies and blockbusters, but in the comics community, mainly in terms of what women are dressed like and how they're treated. There's a lot of debate currently about trying to get super heroines to dress more modestly and not just be sex figures for male gaze so much. Which I applaud that. There was a new design for Batgirl's costume recently, and it looks pretty cool. I mean, it's still very feminine, but it looks more practical and doesn't look nearly like it's like ridiculously form fitting. As past superhero or superheroine costumes have looked like. So I think that's interesting in a sense. I mean, it's coming from a feminist movement perspective, which is some good, some bad, but it's definitely something I feel like Christians can agree with in that, okay, let's cover up a little bit more.
Yeah. So I guess we've kind of talked about, this seems to be, and I tend to be more of this line that there's a certain amount of explicit violence that seems you can explain, it seems artistically honest. If you're going to be trying to gross people out, there should hopefully be some sort of, I like Greg to be here in some ways because he watches more horror stuff. And I don't like horror movies. It's a horror books. I haven't read many short stories. I only like some, Poe and creepy stuff like that. But
well, I don't know that Greg would say that he goes for. I think he likes the Twilight Zone type creepypasta things more than.
But I'm wondering. Okay, say your point is to gross someone out. I mean, I don't like that. I don't think it's good. Is that a valid argument? I mean, that's why some people go to these things, I guess.
I think it does come to a sense of taste, obviously, and I don't want to say this is sort of one of those things that I want to say is almost one of the disputable issues in terms of, like, if you're a Christian writer, you have to take this up with God, I think. I do think, okay, so if you're looking from a Christian perspective, okay, why is something, not something that should be looked at as aside from if it's gross, the grossness factor or whatever. And I think we have to look in the verse in Philippians.
Whatever is true,
whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is excellent, whatever is praiseworthy, think about such things. And I think those are some reasons why, we're meant to focus on what's good and right in the world and not on the other things.
I think it's like, okay, I've been told in certain Fred to use a book example that in the first book, the scene in the middle of the forest at the mound creeps people out.
That it does.
And, but the thing is it's purposely trying to say things are wrong here. And I think, that's the point of showing gross things. It's things are wrong. But if that becomes your entire point, it's weird when what's wrong is your point.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think there is a difference too. I mean, we talked a bit about visuals being an important thing, but you can get away with a little bit more, I think, in the prose side of things.
You can, I think, a lot more, generally.
Like, I remember talking with a coworker who's read a lot of listened to a lot of audio fantasy books, and I asked him something about Game of Thrones, because I knew there's a lot of things, because there was that one article that I shared on Facebook about, we might as well be holy.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, someone was wrestling with watching Game of Thrones, which is this huge cultural touchstone and is full of like sex and ridiculous violence. And even a lot of, non-Christians sometimes think it goes overboard sometimes in some of these things. And he was like, well, how do I still maintain relevance with the culture when it's also dealing with this stuff? And the article was kind of pointing out, the lines in this sort of thing
They keep moving.
Maybe we'll get back to that in a minute. But I was talking with this coworker about Game of Thrones and having read this, and he was kind of like, I don't think he's really seen the show. He's just he had just listened to the books or read the books or whatever, and he didn't seem to have a huge issue with it in a sense. And he's not the kind of guy that would just gloss over bad movies.
Yeah.
He would, if he knows the movie's bad, he wouldn't watch it and that sort of thing. So I kind of wonder if, you look at Game of Thrones has kind of this historical perspective, and not having read it, I apologize somewhat.
I started the first one back in high school, and I stopped because I just couldn't.
Oh, really? So
back in high school, it was very shocking to me.
Oh, okay.
This one scene. So,
but I just wonder if because I've read some like historical fiction books that like deal with some of the like battles and things like that. Oh, and you go into
the violence didn't bother me, or the people hate, the conniving. From the little I mean, it's been 15 years or whatever. Mm-hmm. It was new, back when I read it, before everyone else, read it. But one of the sexual scenes it was too detailed, because in books you can get away with sexual scenes low key,
right?
If you want. For goodness sakes, I think I'm putting this up again. Anna Karenina, the entire theme of the novel is adultery. Uh-huh. And there's not a scene in the book there's a scene, actually, I guess, when she's committing adultery, but there's not a thing described, just the emotional repercussions of it. So you can get away with talking about
this stuff, but you have to go into, even
in film, you can get away with that too,
if you keep certain things off screen. And because I'm sure someone would bring this up, even the Bible has some very explicit stories in it. I mean, there are stories of incest and rape and mutilation and all kinds of weird things in the Old
end
Testament.
Of Judges, man. and I think there's this quote from, I believe, it's been years since I read it, from Madeleine L'Engle.
Wrinkle in Time.
Wrinkle in Time, thank you.
Yeah.
Basically says, it's a Christian author, says the realm of a Christian artist should be everything. Mm-hmm. And I agree with that. There shouldn't be anything off limits. I think the way it's presented, at least from a Christian point of view, you might have boundaries on how it's presented or to whom it's presented.
Mm-hmm. Because as Christians, you do want to be able to share the truth. I mean, we've talked before about how we liked stories that aren't necessarily just a mirror on reality, but kind of show an idealized version. Yeah. But there are definitely
room for other types of storytelling than that.
Right. And even obviously even the ones that are showing a reflection of it there's still an element of truth in it.
Yeah.
That's key. But yeah, there's definitely room for it looks unflinchingly at the world as it currently is.
Well, I had this discussion with my father-in-law, who's a missionary down in Brazil, about Les Mis, the movie. Uh-huh. He did not all care for the whole scene, I Dream a Dream, or what is that what it's called?
Well, probably
the Fantine section.
The stuff right before.
Yeah, which on one hand, I thought being in a comfortable America, it makes you feel just how horrible life was, and she just sold her soul, and it just wretched. Mm-hmm. And where in Brazil, there's enough. He's like not just there, but I mean, I'm innocent. There's enough evil in the world right next to you. You don't need to see it on film. Was his view?
Sure.
And I thought that was interesting. It's again, I know what Victor Hugo was trying to do in his. I don't know what the filmmaker exactly. It's not really a good film. It wasn't particularly explicit.
No,
but it kind of weighed on you.
Sure.
And to me that was kind of the point. But I get the disagreeing with that. So you're talking these kind of vague lines in many ways about what people can. Mm-hmm. But the problem is, like, I think you're going to mention. Well, okay, let me do one more thing, and then I'll try to not be so scatterbrained. I read an interesting article right around the time the article about why not be holy came out. Talking about the problem with nudity in film, even if it's supposed to be or whatever, is that violence is faked. Someone somewhere is nude in front of cameramen and everything, and as a Christian, is that something we want to be doing?
Yeah, that's
and I get that's a interesting thought.
that is a hard one again. I mean, again, in the Schindler's List example, I can understand it. I mean, that's a horrific sort of, it's like burying it all form of nudity in a sense. It's not pleasurable in any sense. But for most other circumstances, it's really hard. I mean, there's sort of a certain cultural aspect to, some cultures in Africa, they don't care if you're naked at all.
That's true.
But in modern Western culture, I find it very difficult to justify it for a Christian film.
Yeah, I can justify violence a lot better, easier.
Yeah,
than especially full nudity in a movie.
Now, here's the thing: when we're talking about lines moving, there are some people who really relish seeing those lines move.
Yeah.
Quentin Tarantino, for example. I mean, his movies are nothing but gratuitous content of one form or another. And I don't know, that's just something that I guess in the sense I kind of rebel against.
Yeah, well,
because you hear most people who study or work in pop culture kind of revel in this moving boundaries and being edgy and all that. Kind of stuff.
And to me, I have a feeling, it could be completely wrong, that a lot of this justification for gratuitous violence or sex, or even explicit, not necessarily, they have reasons. I sometimes feel that someone's just rationalizing, let's see how much we can get away with. Mm-hmm. And not that that's a conscious thought, but it's to be an artist, I need to not be safe. Mm. And I think that's a dangerous thing, because then the need to be new, the need to be real, the need to be raw overtakes, I don't know, it becomes something separate from, you have to think not just what you think needs to be accomplished, but what is this doing to the people watching it?
Mm-hmm. And I don't feel, just to kind of put a caveat on all this, I don't feel like this is a subject that you want to be legalistic about.
No,
because legalism in the past in regards to film codes, production codes, and all that sort of thing is, in a sense, what drove a lot of this kind of stuff. I mean, you could point to the same sort of backlash against this as you had against prohibition. I mean, it could be, it's arguable in a sense that, you had Hitchcock, we talked about in Notorious, that pushing the limits on how long you could have a kiss. And there's certain things, you have any kind of boundary, someone's going to want to push it past the boundaries, obviously. And again, that's kind of the whole point of the article that was saying, we keep letting them move the boundaries. When does it stop? Well, it's a tricky thing. Well, but at the same time, I don't know. There's some sort of balance there, I think, between and honestly, in some ways, it's difficult to say how much we can expect the non-Christian world to follow by, the same
they're going to do
standards.
exactly. I think as a Christian creator, what you need to ask, you need to be very honest with yourself. Why is this in here? Because I think there's many things we can rationalize for putting in that we might not lose anything by taking it out, and we might actually gain something. Right. At least integrity-wise, our relationship, how we're dealing with God, honest. Because when you're writing, there's a very real desire to fulfill your own wishes, even if it's under the guise of being, artsy or literary or whatever. And also, everyone's wanting to push boundaries. I think there's something really countercultural about telling good stories that don't do that. I mean, it takes some skill. It's interesting. People who, when you're forced on network television, you have to say the same story with less random junk.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think I joked back in the, when we talk about cussing. If Jack Bauer can have those horrible days and never use the F word, there are ways to communicate those things without using it.
Right.
You can say yes or no whether that being the best way, but in some ways it's any other form, like a sonnet. What can you get away with without saying things? And sometimes those are the things that are counted literary from writing point of view by implying things without stating them. That's the whole show don't tell,
Yeah. Well, and sort of like what we talked about in the children's kids lit thing. There's all kinds of adults who enjoy kids movies nowadays when they're done by someone like Pixar or whoever, that it's still good storytelling. You don't have to have Not all stories have to have explicit content to be
Yeah.
a good story.
And generally, if you're in it just for the money, explicit content never gets you in the top 10 grossing films.
And that's true. Actually, and that, which reminds me, I think probably the goriest movie I ever saw, I don't remember why I watched this whole thing. My roommates in LA, when I was staying over there, watched this Japanese movie called Battle Royale.
Oh, I know the book.
Yeah.
I never read it, but the concept always sounded interesting, but I didn't know if I would like how it was done.
Yeah. I mean, Battle Royale is basically a story about...
It's like Hunger Games, before, but worse.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's about, I guess, this society that in order to keep the teenagers in line, they randomly, and the story is, this isn't the first time they've done this, but they randomly take this class of students to an island or somewhere, fasten them all with this sort of collar that they've tried to escape. It'll instantly kill them in a bloody way. And basically, it's a fight to the death, a la Hunger Games style. They're each given their own weapon and then kind of sent out to fend for themselves. And it's all like a reality TV show. Like, it's probably the goriest thing I've ever seen. I honestly don't remember much of it because I've kind of blocked it out since then.
Yeah.
But at the time, it's quite nauseating. And it occurred to me that, I mean, I think it was going for this, again, extreme sort of, what do you do in these situations kind of thing? How do you actually, what are student relationships really like, and this battle between the adults and the youth and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it actually had some interesting themes in it, but its audience is quite smaller because of the graphic content. Whereas you have Hunger Games, which, and honestly, the book probably goes into a little bit more explicit detail than the movie goes into, but they're smart. They wanted a PG-13 rating. That makes it more marketable.
I wonder if another definition of gratuitous is where the extras overwhelm the theme.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
That's probably true. Because, like, I know a lot of people pointed out, like in Star Trek Into Darkness, there's that one scene where the girl just randomly takes off is changing clothes while Kirk's there. And it really has absolutely no relevance to the story.
No, exactly.
So that is certainly a gratuitous instance.
Song of violent films. Passion of the Christ is ridiculously violent.
Yes.
And one, you could argue either...
One of the most popular in the modern church.
Yeah. That's an interesting deal.
It is interesting. Yeah.
So
Make of that what you will.
Yeah. So, obviously, no one likes gratuitous stuff. But the problem is, where's your line? And I think, if nothing else, I'm not sure we came down anywhere, because this is something that is, if we'd have a here where it is, I think it would be unfair.
I would almost say, again,
I think less is generally my gut reaction.
Yeah, and my gut reaction would be follow the example of the Bible. Like we said, it talks about some very adult, explicit sort of activities, but it doesn't go into any great detail in it.
I think there's a line between being honest and true and being overexposed.
Yeah.
If that makes, I'm not sure the right words, but
there's some like slimy, good, descriptive scum of the earth explicit words you could throw. We keep using explicit because it's easy. But
so if it like nothing else, hopefully this conversation made you think about when I watch this, or especially as a creator, saying you don't have to follow what everyone else is doing, and maybe you don't have to be as safe as you're being if that's on the other end. I mean, there is some room for extreme. There's no reason you can't talk about dark issues. It's just how do you go about talking about them?
Yeah.
Will's orphan, I mean, she basically tries to commit suicide for like the entire second half of the book. So
hopefully that will lead somewhere, though.
Yeah, exactly. I guess that's it for that, because otherwise we'll just start rambling. And so I guess I'll do soundtrack. All right, well, I don't play many modern video games just because that's how my life has turned out. And so I haven't played many explicit video games.
Maybe by the time Theo gets 10, you'll start getting into games
again.
Maybe
I'll be like, Theo, look, there's this game called Chrono Trigger. And, like right now, like, Theo, you want to play some King's Quest 2 with me? So, we've been playing Mario 64. I mean,
Yeah.
He's 20 years behind.
You need to start getting him on Super Mario World. So.
Yeah.
Although, actually, I guess I need to get you your SNES sometime back first. But anyway.
So, I'm not, the most explicit game I ever played was probably, like, Doom 2. I think I played a little bit on Duke Nukem. Or, wait, no, what was it back in the day, violent-wise? It was, Quake. But I picked out randomly because I love the song. I thought this applies from Leisure Suit Larry. Apparently, in the land, Leisure Suit Larry in the land of the lounge lizards, which I don't know which number that is. But
you never followed the Leisure Suit Larry
I
games?
didn't. The most I ever knew about him was like in Space Quest like 4. You ended up in one scene of Leisure Suit Larry because it's just how it works in Space Quest. But
there's probably some people listening who have no idea what Leisure Suit Larry is.
Yeah. Okay. So it's you probably don't know King's Quest or Space Quest. Basically, adventure game. You point and click and you collect items and then you talk to people and there's usually quirky things and you solve things by using, you use a sponge with the candle and make some sort of weapon and you get out of the...
Okay, this doesn't sound explicit at all, Nick.
No, I don't know. I don't know anything else about Leisure Suit Larry.
I thought, didn't some of the sequels have to do with scantily clad women and things like that?
Oh, yeah, probably. Yeah, I think they did.
That's the direction it went in.
Yeah, it was more, it was 6-bit graphics, but they were scantily clad.
Playboy,
yeah, he was basically a playboy.
Yeah.
I guess it's pretty tame nowadays, probably, but... Yeah. Anyways, the song is remixed by another Soundscape, or if you want his whole, Swedish name, you can go look it up. And it's called Larry's Funky House of Low. Lowe. So, enjoy.
Yeah, baby!
And we're back. Okay, hopefully you enjoyed that funky little tune.
Groovy,
baby. Groovy, baby. And now we'll go to our take
on Tales.
It's that time of the year where Tim and I go and talk about summer movies or summer books beach books, I guess we should call them.
Yeah, I thought we'd throw in beach books or summer reading this year because We didn't really see a lot of movies.
No, oddly enough, we really did not.
I went back and listened to our last episode. I think I talked about like 5 or so, and you talked about 1 or 2 that I hadn't seen. I think I only saw like 2 movies this summer.
That's what I think I saw, and only one. So we have 3 movies total, guys.
Yeah, so that's why.
So we've been really.
It just wasn't nothing really grabbed me. There was partly because the franchises that were out are not ones I care all that much about, like the Planet of the Apes.
Oh yeah, I forgot that was out.
Yeah,
and we didn't see the Godzilla movie.
No, I didn't see the Godzilla. Yeah, Godzilla's not my thing. Transformers aren't my thing.
Oh yeah, that was out too.
So I mean,
see, that's how much attention. Half the time, I don't even know what movie's out unless it's in the 2 theater thing over here at Kenville.
But first, we start off with superheroes because that's what
Yes.
we usually do. And I'll mention, since you didn't see it, X-Men: Days of Future Past, which I'm really surprised that you didn't wind up going and see this. But I guess you were just
It was just at that time. It was just complicated.
Yeah. I enjoyed this movie quite a bit, actually. It was on multiple levels. It was just it felt like a really big, important picture. And it was really fun to see some of the X-Men characters. I mean, we're used to seeing Hugh Jackman as Wolverine like every other summer now.
Yeah.
But it was great to see, Patrick Stewart as Professor X and Magneto again, and some of the other ones. And even the First Class cast, which, I enjoy all what they do too. Which I guess is mainly Professor X and Magneto again, but still. And of course, Jennifer Lawrence, who's
blue.
Taking on. Speaking of gratuitous content, I really wish they would just give Mystique some clothes.
Well, yeah.
I don't understand why she runs around like that, but I mean, it sort of makes sense in her character, but it sort of doesn't.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But
anyway, it was a very fun. It was fun, but it also felt epic and important. And since I enjoy time travel plots maybe more than Aaron Brosnan does, apparently, I don't know what he thought about this movie, but I enjoyed that aspect of it. Although, interestingly, this is sort of a spoiler, but
it's been out for a while.
It's been out for a while, I think. They say that because of this movie, it could be that anything but the First Class is not necessarily canon in X-Men chronology.
Oh,
now.
Interesting.
Yeah, which, I mean, it was very obvious at the end of the movie that they were trying to rewrite X-Men 3, and which they pretty much did away with in a sense. And I don't think X-Men 3 was a movie I remember sort of enjoying when I was in theater, but then afterwards thinking about things and being like, there were a lot of problems here. But at the same time, I don't know where exactly they're going to go with the X-Men franchise after this, because Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen probably don't have that many more X-Men movies left in them. I mean, not that I think they're about to die, but I mean, I think they're getting up there. They probably, I mean, it is to their character's benefit that they don't actually move around much. Yeah. But I doubt that they have very many more.
As far as the X-Men franchise go, I think my favorites were probably the first X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
I like First Class a lot.
Yeah. X-Men 2 is actually pretty good too.
See, I don't much care for X-Men 2.
Okay.
But see, you're not the only one who likes it, so it must just be me.
Well, I seem to be the only one who didn't mind the first Wolverine movie.
See, I like the second one better than the first one.
Well, I'd say the second one was better too. It's just people talk about X-Men Origins Wolverine like it was the worst thing ever, like worst superhero movie ever. And I'm sort of like, okay. But anyway,
okay.
So that was that. Then, of course, there was Guardians of the Galaxy, which was quite fun.
But it was quite a fun movie, and Tim and I both met when we talked about it. Most people who've seen it love.
Yeah.
It's just funny. It's fun.
Yeah.
I remember hearing on actually The World and everything, and I started listening to.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cool.
But that the director wanted to make a movie that made you feel like Back to the Future, Raiders of the Lost Ark. So, and I think he, to a certain extent, captured that sort of like, this is just a fun adventure.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
I heard someone else compared to Ghostbusters.
Okay, yeah.
Like, fun group of characters in a situation even over their heads kind of thing. That was the surprising thing about it, because I went into it a little afraid that it was going to come off feeling a little too much like Firefly. Which, there's a lot of neat things I like about Firefly, but also have this kind of sense of the characters aren't really that good people. They just kind of are in the situations. And their morality is very loose in a sense. And there was a little bit of that Guardians of the Galaxy, but I was really surprised by how much they brought up not only the humanness of these characters, but the desire to become a hero in a sense.
Yeah. Little nitpicky thing. It seemed like it was kind of chopped together weird occasionally.
Yeah. There were a few things we were like, what? seems like there was a scene missing here.
Yeah.
Like they crashed into the villains.
And I think you only notice it because the rest of the movie was just so much fun. It's just like,
then all of a sudden you're like, wait, what?
we missed something. Like you blinked. Or...
Like the one I just I think there were a couple of these, but the one I remember the most is they crash into the main villain's spaceship, and there's this one scene where they're all together. Then they go out to outside, and suddenly the next scene is the green girl meeting up with the blue girl.
Yeah.
I don't remember their names.
Gamora and Nebula.
Yeah, or I guess you could say green Uhura and blue Amy Pond.
Yeah. That's true.
Which is weird, but yeah. But it just seemed like you didn't. I don't remember seeing the main heroes split up and then going into the other. So that was weird.
It'll be interesting to see how much gravity it keeps.
Yeah,
I mean, because it's such a fun movie, but it's very light in some ways. Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting as time goes by whether
what the long-term impact it'll have.
Yeah.
It will.
Yeah, though that I love watching the movie after you leave. Not that it's not forgettable, but it just sits very easy.
I will say immediate.
Which I don't think is a bad thing.
Yeah, and I will say immediate impressions after leaving the theater for both. I liked X-Men a little bit more just because I felt like it had a bit more significance to it. It was a grander story in some
Now I'm
ways.
excited that they didn't actually spend that much time getting the group together in this movie, but next movie, which they're already working on, you could just have all those characters there already ready to go.
Yeah,
it'd be like a mini Avenger.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see where they go with it. I mean,
there's a lot of potential because it's nice to have a space opera.
Yeah, and a relatively new one. These are not characters that any of us are really overly familiar with. I mean, I guess the Guardians of the Galaxy team, as a team name, has been around for a little while, but this actual roster of characters that they used in the movie was really only started in 2008.
Oh, really?
Which is around the time the first Iron Man came out. Okay. So this is a really new thing, relatively new thing. All right, so then those are the superhero movies of the summer. What was the other movie that you saw next?
My wife and I went to go see Maleficent. Okay, and before seeing Maleficent, Natasha was very excited about it. I wasn't sure what to think of it because I was worried it was going to be one of these movies where, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, but the bad guy is the good guy, You're like, is this just going to be one of those, everything, good is bad, bad is good, sort of, twist on. And it really wasn't that. It was still a fairy tale.
So Maleficent was still evil at the end, but you felt was it a sort of a tragic turn?
No. What's interesting is she starts good, turns evil momentarily, and then becomes good again.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
It was really kind of cool. I mean, what they did, they made, and again, these are all spoilers. Sorry, guys, if you haven't seen it. But the King Philip, who's in charge of the castle, he kind of gets very twisted up. He's the bad guy. Mm-hmm. So largely what they did, they've taken the Maleficent, made her, I mean, obviously the scene that they show in the preview and the scene from the movie with her, cursing Sleeping Beauty and all that, is kind of her high point of being evil. And then she's slowly, basically, and these are all spoilers, basically comes to, Natasha says I should not keep talking.
She gave you a look.
Well, here's the problem. The problem is that there's a lot of, it's fun to watch the transformation.
Okay.
Both ways. Without spoiling too much, it really felt like it was set up as a fairy tale where you got greed, you got love, you have vengeance that's changed. I mean, it kept all the elements of a big fairy tale and just kind of flipped the roles of characters. And I was actually very happy with it. I was very pleased with it. It was really good.
See, I'm really surprised that they went that way with it because Maleficent has always been kind of one of Disney's big villains, like
evil.
Yeah, I mean, she actually says in the Sleeping Beauty movie that she is, mistress of all evil. Like, she references hell and all this kind of stuff, and so I was really kind of conflicted about the movie, like you were too, in the sense, because
I don't want this bad guy to be our sympathetic but tragic hero. I don't much care for the black hero, the anti-hero. Or
have you ever seen Wicked? Or read Wicked?
No, Natasha has, but I have not actually read it.
I'd be curious I'd be really curious. Natasha, how would you compare this to Wicked?
Come over here.
We're drafting. It's a good thing that the podcast brought Natasha to this planet as well.
Well, she actually just follows and she's our secretary most time of these planets. But
so how would it compare to Wicked exactly?
Oh man, it's been a long time since I've seen Wicked. I saw the play. I didn't read the book. I really love the play, and it makes the what's her name?
Is it Ozma?
Who?
Ozma?
No.
No, that's not what they call her. Okay.
Anyway, the Green Witch. Jeez, I can't even remember her name.
Glinda's the good witch. I'm trying to think of.
Anyway, it makes her the sympathetic character, and Glinda is kind of just a ditz, you know. Maleficent's a sympathetic character, but the good characters of the story aren't also turned into bad characters. I mean, they're also good characters. So it's a little bit different than Wicked in that way.
It subverts a lot of expectations of both what you thought Sleeping Beauty was, but also what you thought they were going to do with Maleficent.
Mm-hmm.
So would you say it's closer to Once Upon a Time than Wicked in some ways? Because I mean, Once Upon a Time also has done a lot of like turning its villains into good characters, which you arguably, if you're going to make your characters so sympathetic in a long-running TV show like that, you kind of want to see them become redeemed in a sense.
Yeah, it's similar to Once Upon a Time. Yeah.
But at the same time, it doesn't disparage its good characters either, the heroes. They still try to keep them as, noble, as opposed to... The vibe I always got from Wicked was that it made, like, everyone else seem kind of bad and kind of made the... It kind of gave this thing that the Wicked Witch was just, kind of put down upon and all this kind of stuff.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's...
Okay.
Yeah.
Just curious.
We need to bring in an expert. So no, but anyways, Natasha and I were both not just pleasantly surprised, but we talked about a lot. We really liked this movie. It was beautiful. Okay, and this is going to sound weird, but there's part of the movie that I felt like is what Narnia should have looked like.
Oh, really?
It's weird. Yeah. I mean, just in the fancifulness, because computer graphics come so far and stuff. The impressions I got from the previews and then what it actually ended up being were very different in some ways. And for me, at least, in a good way. I'll be interested. My sister Summer has not seen it, but she loves Maleficent, the evil, evil Maleficent. So we'll see if she likes the show.
Yeah. And that was part of my confliction, because in a sense, I do kind of like having the evil villain Maleficent, partly because of like the Kingdom Hearts games. In a sense, she's a very memorable villain in that way. But yeah, it'll be interesting. And I'll watch it eventually.
Yeah, and Angelina Jolie does a great job as always.
Yeah.
But, actually, most people in that do good job.
I could tell from all appearances, it looked like she was going to be one of the highlights of it.
Yeah. But it was pretty neat. I think. I know Greg was cautious about it. We were kind of making fun of the twisting of...
Yeah.
But it was much better than I thought it was going to be.
Okay, interesting. Well, something to Netflix eventually. Okay, so summer reading. Let's just pick out some highlights. I'll give you a chance to think about something since you've been talking about stuff. I guess I'll throw in a plug here for Ranger's Apprentice, which is a kids series that I started reading, I don't know, several months ago, and then I've read 2 of the books this summer because they're very fast reads. I read the 3rd book in about a day just on our drive down to the beach several weeks ago. What I like about these books is that, I think I would have enjoyed them as a kid, even before I was really into fantasy in a sense, because they take place in the fantasy world, but it all feels pretty familiar. Like the main kingdom is probably kind of based in like a kind of a United Kingdom feel. Then you've got like a neighboring kingdom, Celtica, which is, Ireland. Yeah. And then there's a Viking culture, and then there's another country that they border that's very French, and they give them different names, but you can, it's pretty obvious what they're referencing. But it's neat. It's about again, Ranger's Apprentice. The main character becomes an apprentice to a ranger and learns about sneaking around and firing arrows and all this stuff, and gets involved with the greater exploits of the kingdom. Big battles. It's got the spunky hero, or spunky's not the right word for a ranger, but young protagonist. Another thing I like about it is that you get a feel for the world and like what it would take to be all this thing without going to the excruciating detail that, say, Aragon went into. Aragon is like really bloated with all kinds of details that you really don't need, and you just want to get to the actual story. And this Ranger's Apprentice, you feel like you're understanding a lot about the skills of what it would take to be a ranger while not feeling bogged down by it. So very fun series, and I hope to read some more of them. Like I said, kids series, but I think it's kind of like on the border. It's like low end YA. You could almost say. Like some smart 10-year-olds could read it. Certainly 12-year-olds would love it. And I guess that's sort of what the age I am secretly. I don't know. I just read them because they're fun and they're light and they're enjoyable.
I was thinking about this section. I don't have many things I've finished this summer.
Well,
I've been working my way through Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, and in July was largely a wash, anyways. But it's like 1,000. I mean, it's a massive book. Impressions I'll just give right now is that if you love world building, this world is fascinating. And I think if I have a complaint at this level is that the characters are not quite as intriguing as all the details. And I think to me that's kind of a downside. And they're not bad by any means. I mean they're good characters. It's just they're not to me quite strong enough to make me rip through this 1,000-page book. If that makes sense. I mean, it's not really a down. It is a complaint for mine, but it's not a bad thing. It's not like they're badly written characters. It's such a massive thing that it takes like 200 pages to figure out this world, because just you feel like some of it's just so we can explore this world and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm holding off judgment. I mean, I enjoy it. I'll see if I read the next one quickly or a long time from now.
Here's a question for you. Since from what you said about Brandon Sanderson's original books before, do you think perhaps one reason why, because each time you've talked about it, you have this caveat.
I know.
I like this, I didn't like this.
I know, it's weird. I was trying to figure that out.
Do you think it's because he's not as much of a character writer as you are?
I was actually having this discussion with my mom yesterday. I'm like, I'm reading this book. I'm like, I can't figure out why I always have this caveat. And it might be that. It might be, I think he is more of a world builder. And he'll admit he loves making worlds and the rules and and as a writer myself, that stuff's less important. Not that I don't, I find Dune interesting. I find this world interesting, Rashon or whatever it's called. It's actually very interesting, but it almost always feels too, I think that it might be just I like characters more. And I was trying to analyze, okay, this is the beginning of a big series. This guy finished Wheel of Time. I loved Wheel of Time. Why did I, couldn't wait for the next book of that? And this one, I don't know. But I heard Sanderson say one time about Robert Jordan that he was really good at getting inside the characters' heads. And I've thought about that since, and there's just a way Robert Jordan writes that makes you it identifies the characters very closely. And I think there's more of a distance in how Sanderson does characters. Not a lot. I mean, it's not a big deal. And it could just be that I like the world better, I got it at the right time. There's all kinds of indefinable things that might have mattered. And I might finish this book and think, this is great. Halfway through the book, I'm like, this is getting pretty good. I would like to read the next one. Right now, I'm like, I think sometimes it's that I don't have the time to invest in a world that needs, you need to sit down and read, 70 pages at a time. Mm-hmm. And I get little snippets, so I don't sink in as deep as the world demands. It could be. On a completely other level, I did hunt down, a friend of mine had, the novelization, Sword Art Online, the first light novel from Japan, has been translated to come over to America. It's what the anime was based on. Mm-hmm. And I was mentioned to Tim before the podcast, what's interesting about it is that it feels like the novelization of the anime. It is ridiculously, in the parts it has, it's very, very similar. I mean, remarkably similar. And the biggest difference is largely that there are things missing. Because
the anime actually adds more.
The anime, and from what I've heard,
fills in some of the gaps.
I've heard that some of these gaps are filled in by other short stories he wrote, and then they move them to their proper places and help build connections and stuff. I mean, you get a little bit into his thoughts. Some things make a little more sense. You get a little bit more about Heathcliff before the final battle. I mean, you get details about how the world works that you don't. I mean, you get technical things, but you don't actually seem to get that much more depth. If that makes sense. I mean, you get fills in like, this is how this works, this is how this works. Like, apparently, the 25th and the 50th level bosses were really super hard. So when they get to 75, they kind of expect it to be ridiculously hard.
Oh, yeah.
So there's little things like that are, there's a scene, kind of throwaway, couple lines about them killing the laughing coffin Guild, which comes into play in this most recent
Yeah.
sort of thing. So there's our season. So there are extra things, but it was not as, I don't know if it's translation. I don't know whether it's so closely similar, but it just felt like I'm reading it and I'd rather be watching the anime. You know.
Yeah, that is interesting.
It's kind of, I mean, they mentioned that there were 10 unique sword skills and he got one of them. Stuff like that.
I'd be really curious, if that's typical of light novel to anime adaptations.
Yeah, I don't know, but I've never read a book that was, normally we read the book, it's not vastly different, but
yeah, it feels expanded in some way. Yeah,
and this did not. It was weird. I mean, it was an enjoyable insight. I never read a light novel, and it was neat for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, odd.
Very interesting. I'll throw in just a couple other reading things I did one I finished and one I haven't yet, and I haven't decided if I will or not. I probably will. But anytime I go to the beach, I always try to take some sort of seafaring book along, and this time I took two. Although one was recommended to me by Greg because he's a huge Redwall fan, and so I read Triss, which wasn't actually quite as much seafaring as I thought there would be in it, but it was still neat. It was about basically a squirrel from a northern kingdom that escaped slavery, was just trying to get away basically, and wound up helping out. Well, she wound up helping out Redwall, but I think it's also partly because she led a bunch of the villains that were chasing her to Redwall in a sense. So she was partially helpful. But to be fair, then I guess there was also this other thing that was lurking nearby, which I won't go into. Spoilers. But it was a Redwall book. It was enjoyable. It had the colorful characters. I felt it could have been a little shorter because it felt like they were eating like every 5 pages. I kid you not. Like, I know Redwall books are known for their meals, but it was bordering on ridiculous. I felt. So anyway, what was funny is I read that, and that's overall a very cheerful book for a book that was about freeing slaves. For the most part, very optimistic characters. Then I go on to read a book about Horatio Hornblower, which you might be familiar with from the A&E series adaptations. Which in those books, well, at least the A&E ones I've seen, I know there are like 2 that I haven't. But in those, he was like a midshipman to a young lieutenant, very young. In the book I was reading, he is a captain, and it starts off with him like super, super stressed out about outfitting his ship with all the things he needs and all the crew that he needs, and he's just very constantly worried about keeping a proper appearance, and not only in front of his colleagues but in front of his men. He acts like the tough sailor, yet at the same time he does feel sympathy for like the very poor living conditions they live in and all this stuff. And it's like all the worst aspects of the British Navy, of working in the British Navy, are kind of brought up, and it's very different sort of reading material than Redwall was. So, but interesting. I mean, you want to get into character's head. It stays very firmly inside Horatio Hornblower's head and doesn't really go into the other characters at all. So, interesting book. That's the one I haven't finished yet, and I just haven't gotten around to getting back to. Well, I probably will eventually, but that's that.
All right. Well, that's pretty much our wrap up then.
Yep.
So
I guess I will give one last shout out to not a book or a movie, but a TV special, and that was Phineas and Ferb's Star Wars special, which was a lot of fun because it was a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern story of Star Wars. Basically, it's an alternate universe where Phineas and Ferb live at Star Wars, and they go on an adventure that takes place at the same time as A New Hope.
Nice.
And it's really funny too because it starts off. They're living on Tatooine, like they're next door neighbors with Luke, except Phineas and Ferb love Tatooine. It's like there's so much stuff they can do, and they're kind of poking fun at Luke for constantly like being wishy-washy and wanting to go wandering and all this kind of stuff.
That's awesome.
Just some of the humor they are able to poke into like various corners of it. It's like at one point when one of the early scenes of Death Star is like, there's a cameo with the creators of the show there as Imperial officers, and they're like talking about something. One of them's like, "Oh, you better be careful and don't let Vader find out about that? And he's like, Psh, he's not gonna find out about me goofing off way down here. Then all of a sudden he's choking and stuff, and the other guy's freaking out. I was like, oh, don't worry, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. I'm pulling your leg. It's like, you.
That's awesome.
If you love Star Wars, there's a lot of great little in jokes in
Awesome.
there.
So,
I think that's our show.
Yeah, I guess so. Do you want to give our soundtrack info and then we'll bow out?
Yeah, well, I guess I should tell them where they can listen to our work.
Oh, fine. If they want to listen.
If they haven't done it before, you can find us at derailedtrainsofthought.blogspot.com.
Also on iTunes.
And also on mixler.com/derailedtrainsofthought. I am getting close to, I said last time I was going to start putting on episodes on YouTube, and I have started working.
Oh, nice. Oh, we'll be popular then.
Yeah.
Apparently, we're supposed to be on Stitcher now, too.
On what?
Stitcher? That's where all the cool podcasts are going.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously.
I never even heard of that.
Well, you're not Zach then.
Apparently not. Stitcher. I'll have to look that up. Sigh. All right. Is that everywhere?
And then you can email us at derailedtrains@gmail.com, and we won't check you. So.
And don't forget to keep up with everything related to Children of the Wells, all the exciting blogs that we put out there.
Yes, exciting.
And hopefully eventually
Actually, there is some good blogs, but there should be work out soon, like an actual story. We've been treading water for a while here, but we're actually almost to the shore.
Yeah. I like that. Good analogy there. Okay, so my soundtrack is I picked a song from, well, I guess it's got a couple tracks of references from across the Mortal Kombat franchise.
Ooh.
There was a video game franchise that's as known for gratuitous violence as probably Mortal Kombat. The main game this is from is Mortal Kombat 3. The name of the remix is Mortal Confrontation. Of course, that is spelled with a K. And the remixer is the duo The Dual Dragons.
Oh, Dual Dragons, they're hardcore rockers.
Yeah, a lot of metal in this.
Yep.
So, which is, it's appropriate for Mortal Kombat, honestly.
Yep.
But that's our show, episode
Okay, well,
47.
I hear a lot of gunfire.
Oh no, the soldiers are getting closer?
I think so, and I can smell blood everywhere.
Gosh, okay. Let's hope the podcast spirits us away to our next location.
Yeah, take us somewhere nice,
Actually, we better be careful about saying the podcast spirits us away. We might wind up in a
spirited away.
We might wind up in a bathhouse somewhere, like cleaning up after stink spirits and stuff.
There's worse places we could be.
Like here.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so till next time.
All right, this has been Nick.
And this is Tim.
Adios.
me.